Ebony, and I work with Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury. I'd like to welcome you to Congresswoman Stansbury's telephone town hall. Right now, we are in listen-only mode, which means that you can hear me, but I cannot hear you. In just a moment, I will introduce Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, and then we will open it up for questions from all of you. But first, let me go over a few housekeeping items. If you would like to ask a question, you can press *3 on your phone, and you will be put in line to speak with one of our staff members. If you want to subscribe to our newsletter, press *6. If you'd like to ask your question live, press *3, and our staff will take down your name, where you live in the district, and your question. The next time you hear your name, you will be live to the entire conference, and you can ask your question directly to the Congresswoman. Again, press *3 now to ask a question. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible, so please press *3 now if you'd like to ask a question to the Congresswoman. Again, that's *3 to ask a question and *6 to sign up for our newsletter. Now, I would like to turn over the conversation to Congresswoman Stansbury. Congresswoman?
All right. Well, good evening, and thank you, as always, Ebony, one of our MVPs when it comes to helping us run these town halls, and our amazing staff who, by the way, are federal workers and are working without pay, including myself right now during this government shutdown. But we are here to show up, to serve our community, and to continue to fight to reopen the government and to address the healthcare crisis and make sure that New Mexicans are taken care of, because that is what we're here to do. So I am Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, and I am so deeply proud to serve as your Congresswoman for New Mexico's 1st congressional district, and it includes the Albuquerque metro area and 10 counties in central New Mexico. We are joined by thousands of New Mexicans all across the district by telephone as well as online. So hi to everyone who's joining us online as well. We're excited to have some time to talk to you today to give you an update on what's happening with the government shutdown, which I know is impacting so many New Mexicans. I know many folks are eager to find out what's going on and what happens next. And of course, we want to take your questions, so we'll save a lot of time at the end to hopefully open up the lines and hear from all of you. So if you have a question, get ready to ask the question. Ebony is going to give more information in just a moment. But I want to just talk for a few moments about the government shutdown. As many of you know, we are now entering the 4th week of our government shutdown. The government shut down just after midnight on October 1st. And I want to be completely clear, this was a completely avoidable shutdown. There is no reason why the government should be shut down right now. It is Congress's responsibility to make sure that a budget is passed before the end of the fiscal year. And it is Congress's responsibility to make sure that the American people are represented and taken care of. But unfortunately, part of why we are in a shutdown right now is because the GOP has completely shut down the House of Representatives and is refusing to negotiate not only to reopen the government, but to fix the healthcare crisis that is pending with insurance under the Affordable Care Act, or what many New Mexicans know as your Be Well or your Marketplace accounts. So I'm going to get into some of the technical stuff, but let me just start at a very, very high level and talk about what is going on with this shutdown. So as many of you know, the way the federal government is funded is that our fiscal year goes from October 1st till September 30th. And so Congress has an entire year to pass a budget. In order to do that, the normal process would be for the president to make a request to Congress. Usually that happens in the February or March timeframe, and then Congress begins the appropriations process. And if you recall from your Schoolhouse Rock or your high school civics or elementary U.S. history class, the founding fathers set up our Constitution to make sure that the people's house and the representatives that are closest to the people actually control the budget process and taxation and spending. And the reason literally goes back to our nation's founding. We all learned about the Boston Tea Party, and of course that had to do with the fact that there was taxation without representation, and our government at the time, the colonial government of England, was taxing the colonies and trying to basically spend money from the citizens of this country on things that were actually harming them. And so when the founding fathers, after the revolution, set up the Constitution, it was critical that they put the ability to both tax and spend in the people's house. And that is the House of Representatives, because we are the most representative body in the government. And so every year it is our job in the House to get a budget developed. That's done in consultation with whatever administration is in power. It's done in consultation with the people that we represent. And Congress, through our appropriations process, is supposed to hear bills, to provide opportunities for the public to send their feedback, and to ultimately provide a public process for how we all can help shape the nation's budget. And normally by the summertime, those 12 appropriations bills are passed out of the House. Then they go to the Senate. The Senate does their work. And then ultimately you have a budget passed by the end of the year that can be signed into law by the president. But unfortunately, this year, the new leadership in the White House and in the House and Senate decided to spend the vast majority of this year on a very specific bill that many of you probably heard about. They named the bill the big beautiful bill, but we're calling it the big ugly bill because of its impacts to the American people. But they spent much of the legislative year this year working on a massive tax package that basically gave permanent tax breaks to billionaires. It increased taxes for low-income people. It cut off millions of Americans from access to healthcare under Medicaid, Medicare, and through the Affordable Care Act. It will ultimately cut millions of Americans off of food assistance, and it will also cut millions of Americans off of their assistance to go back to school, including Pell Grants and student loans. And so this bill really is catastrophic for millions of Americans. And on top of that, it ultimately increases deficit spending in the United States by $4 trillion over the coming decade. And the Republicans, of course, pushed this package forward so rapidly that some of them voted on it without even realizing what was in the bill and now have buyer's remorse. But one of the things that is really important to understand is that because they used so much of the time this year, as well as the political capital of their own members to push this package through, they didn't finish the appropriations process. And at the same time, the entire congressional process got mired in an investigation that has been ongoing for months involving the Epstein files. Now, some of you may be wondering, what the heck does the Epstein files have to do with anything? And the truth is that as the Oversight Committee, which I'm a member of, has begun to investigate this case, it's very clear that the White House and the Republican-led House are engaged in a direct cover-up in the release of the Epstein files. And so beginning in August, when we should have been finalizing the budget, they actually canceled votes and shut down the House and sent members back home early because they were concerned that a vote was going to continue to come to the floor to basically demand that the White House release the Epstein files. So over the last month and a half, basically what we have seen is that the Republicans are refusing to bring the House back into session. And in order to do that, They have canceled votes now 5 times. So this is the 4th week during the shutdown that they've canceled votes, but the 5th time that they've canceled a week of votes to prevent a vote on the Epstein files. They're refusing to swear in Adelita Grijalva, who is the newly elected congresswoman from Arizona. And they are basically refusing to engage in negotiations to get a budget deal completed and across the finish line. And meanwhile, they have been asking our Senate colleagues to just vote over and over and over again on a short-term continuing resolution that got shoved through the House in September, which would have even expired just in the coming weeks. So we're in a really bad situation, and we know that this is impacting thousands of New Mexico families. We know that, New Mexico has one of the highest percentages of both civilian federal workers as well as active duty military and veterans. And so we know that many, many New Mexicans are suffering right now. I am here this week because this is the 4th week that they've shut down the House, and we felt it was really important to be back in district to hear from our constituents and to hear how you're being impacted and what you would like to see us do. I did, however, spend a lot of the day driving around the district, and even right before this town hall, stopped at a local farm stand. And, the owner was telling me his son is a federal worker. So a lot of people are saying, how does this end? How do we get out of this? So let's talk a little bit about that. Right now, there's a lot of unknowns, even in the last 24 hours. Unfortunately, my colleagues across the aisle, House Republicans, are refusing to come back into session. They're refusing to negotiate, but there is word on the street that behind closed doors, there is an effort to try to get a new continuing resolution and to potentially negotiate some sort of healthcare deal in the Senate. And so that is what it's going to take to get the government reopened. And so part of our message is that we need to continue to push our colleagues across the aisle to reopen the government, to bring the House back, to cut a bipartisan solution, and to address the healthcare crisis. Now, let me just take a moment to talk about the healthcare crisis because I know this is going to impact so many New Mexicans. Part of why this is such a fight right now is that in the big ugly bill, they refuse to reauthorize federal subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. And what that means is that essentially tens of millions of Americans will now see their healthcare insurance go up. And because the insurance companies send out new notices during this time frame to prepare for open enrollment, you may already have found that you got a notice that your healthcare insurance is going to skyrocket. So, one of the examples that we found when we put in information into the Be Well portal, which is our marketplace here in New Mexico, is that a family who's currently paying close to $300 a month for health insurance could see their health insurance go up to $900 a month. That is not okay. That is not sustainable. That is not viable for our families. And so New Mexico has chosen to conduct a special session at the state level to try to shore up our health care marketplace, as well as some of the food assistance cuts that we can expect. But unfortunately, not only do we see congressional representatives shutting down the House and being unwilling to negotiate, we're in a situation where the White House is ratcheting up the pressure. They've been threatening to fire federal workers and sending out RIF notices. They've been sending notices to states that they will try to force the states to withhold SNAP benefits. All of these things are likely illegal, but highly questionable and certainly not okay for our people. And that's why we're pushing back at every level. There has been a court case that has a temporary restraining order put in place by a federal district court this week to protect federal workers. So if you are a federal worker out there, if you've received a RIF notice during the shutdown, please contact our office. We can help connect you with the unions and other folks who are working on that case. If you're concerned about, there's a number of agencies that have said that they may RIF federal workers, please contact our office. We're going to be providing that information. That's one of the primary things that our office is here to do, is to help New Mexicans navigate this difficult time. The other issue around SNAP is, of course, we're working very closely with the state to make sure that they don't cut off SNAP benefits. There's also a restructuring of SNAP benefits happening because of the Big Ugly Bill. And so we're working very closely to look at all legal options and also administrative options to make sure that New Mexicans are okay in the short term. In terms of families who are currently working without pay or furloughed, we want you to know that there's a lot of resources available. Many of our local credit unions are currently providing zero interest loans against your paycheck. So if you're a federal worker and normally you were supposed to get paid on Friday, contact your local credit union. We can also provide a list of those credit unions, and many of these credit unions are providing those no interest loans. So basically you can borrow your paycheck and then pay it back when we get back pay. I know a lot of people are asking, am I going to get back paid? And the answer is yes. After the last major shutdown that happened in the first Trump administration, Congress passed a law requiring that federal workers get back pay. So that is what is anticipated. Also, our food banks are helping families access groceries right now. Both Roadrunner Food Bank in Albuquerque, the Storehouse in Sandoval County, or wherever you live in the 10 counties in our district, please contact your local food bank and food pantry. A lot of entities are setting up food drops for families that are struggling right now. And there's also support out there for utilities and other needs. So there's a lot of resources available, and my office is here to help, especially as families are struggling. But most importantly, we want to get the government open. And so working diligently every day. I am flying back and forth every few days to Washington, D.C. And we're trying to keep up the pressure to make sure that our colleagues understand how damaging this shutdown is and that we can get back to work. In terms of next steps and kind of the bigger picture about what's happening at the federal level, I want all of you to know that the New Mexico delegation, all 5 members, myself, Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez, Gabe Vasquez, Senator Heinrich, and Senator Lujan, we all work very closely. We're here to serve the state. We are united 100% in our fight for New Mexico and getting a bipartisan solution to reopen the government and to address the healthcare crisis. And we also all have caseworkers that can help individuals who are struggling right now with the shutdown. But I know also many of you are asking the question, and then what? Because we are certainly seeing an undermining of the constitutional authority of Congress and the judiciary and attacks on our everyday freedoms every day. And so one of the things that, we also want you to know is that, we're working on every front to defend our Constitution, the civil rights and civil liberties of New Mexicans, and to reverse the really damaging things that this administration is doing, while also planning for and imagining the future and what we will build when hopefully this nightmare is over. So I think I will leave it there. I know many of you probably have lots and lots of questions, but I'll turn it back to Ebony to take our first question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. For those of you just joining us, if you'd like to ask a Congresswoman a question, press *3. Again, that's *3 to ask Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury a question. So we're going to go ahead and turn to questions now. Right now, we have Gilbert from Albuquerque on the line. Gilbert, you are live with Congresswoman Stansbury.
Hello, Congresswoman. First off, I want to say thank you for all your efforts, all your transparency, all the work that you're doing for us. It's very much appreciated. First off, my wife is one of the workers for the federal government that has to go to work and is not getting paid. The one thing I'd love for you to emphasize is that it sounded like you weren't getting paid either, nor is your staff.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be one thing I'd love for you just to really emphasize. You're not getting paid, because what's going out in the media right now is that the House and the Senate are not wanting to move, but they're still getting paid.
Mm.
So if that's not the case, people need to be educated on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the second part is,
yeah. Go ahead.
so
Oh, Gilbert, I think we lost your second half of your question. Go ahead and try again.
okay, I wanted to re-emphasize the fact that basically to validate your answer and response regarding premiums going up, our premiums are going from $600 to $1,200 as an estimate. So the naysayers that it's not going to affect anybody, they're wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, let me just say, I mean, thank you for sharing that about your own premiums. And this is, again, like I was saying just a few moments ago, this is a fully avoidable shutdown, as is the healthcare crisis that got created by this big, ugly bill. You know, when they were trying to pass this bill over the summer, we kept saying to our colleagues across the aisle, if you end these premiums, millions of Americans are going to lose either access to healthcare because they can't afford their premiums, or essentially lose access to the marketplace. And even just in the last few weeks, I hear my colleagues across the aisle go on media and say, well, it's not a big deal. And I'm sorry, I grew up in a low-income family without healthcare insurance. And so I know what it's like to grow up without health insurance, how that affects families. And I also know what the crushing debt of medical debt can do to a family. And I've seen it personally in my family. And so this is not acceptable. And, you know, millions and millions of Americans are going to face really serious decisions. Do I pay for, you know, hundreds, potentially thousands of dollars in premium increases, or am I going to be able to pay for my rent? Am I going to be able to pay for groceries? Am I going to be able to go back to school? And this is just not acceptable. My hope is that my colleagues across the aisle will understand as these notices come out from the healthcare companies that provide insurance. But right now, I think they really have their heads in the sand. So please share your stories with us. It's really important that we get that out there. In terms of pay for me and my staff, all of us are federal workers. The budget for the Congress is also appropriated by Congress. And so we are furloughed, unpaid, working federal employees right now. Technically, members of Congress can collect a salary right now, but I have chosen to not collect my salary because I don't think it's right for millions of Americans and contractors across the country to be asked to work without pay or to be furloughed. And so I also am not getting paid right now. But you know what? I'm going to keep showing up for our people. It doesn't matter because that's my job. All right. Next question.
Next, we have April. April, you are live with the Congresswoman.
Thank you, and thank you, Congresswoman, for all the work you do. We greatly appreciate you, and I must say, after the recent demonstrations in New Mexico, the No Kings Day, I am so proud of our New Mexican people that we are standing up to what's going on. I wanted to ask you if you have some idea of when the greatest impact on the greatest number of people will be on their insurance rates. Will that come before November 1? Will it come middle of November? Are people actually getting billed already for their next insurance? Or will it happen after the portal is open for Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, if nothing is moving, wouldn't that be a really good time to really hit the news on who's responsible for those increases?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so the answer to your question is a little bit of all of the above, because the way that the Affordable Care Act works is it's administered by state level marketplaces, and each of the different states have different deadlines at which the new premiums get announced. And then folks basically go on to the marketplace during the open enrollment season, and you can plug in your information and decide what kind of insurance you want to buy for the upcoming year. So you're not going to see an increase in your insurance until January 1 in terms of money being taken out of your bank account, but you will see visually the increase in the insurance rates as soon as you go into your marketplace portal. So for New Mexico, as I understand it, the deadline was the 15th for the insurance agencies to notify New Mexico what the premium increase would be. And so, as I understand it, you can actually go on to Be Well right now, which is our marketplace, and put in your information to see what your premium increase will be. But other states, it's not going to hit for another week or 2 weeks or whatever that is. But yes, I mean, you know, some of the questions that we're getting are exactly the right questions. Like when is it going to be enough? When are the Republicans going to relent and understand the severity of this crisis? And, you know, in some ways that's a question I can't understand because I'm not inside the hearts and minds of my colleagues and why they've been so non-responsive to their own constituents. I mean, you know, they not only shut down the House, but as I understand it, many Republicans have been home now for 4 weeks almost. They have not held town halls. They're not responding to constituents. They're not doing press. And in fact, the Speaker and leadership of the House said that part of why they didn't bring them back to Washington is they didn't want their own members of Congress saying anything stupid to the public. And that's partly because they know their own members care about their constituents. And if they speak up, they're going to do like Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing and saying that we have a healthcare crisis and it has to be fixed. So it's important that we continue to not only use the media and social media. Obviously, myself and our members of Congress are doing that. But we also need all of you to help share your stories, to help educate folks in your family and friend circles so that people really understand what's going on. And if you have friends and family who live in states with Republican members of Congress, they need to call their members of Congress and really help their members understand where they're at as their constituents. So I appreciate the question and I agree wholeheartedly. All right, Ebony, next.
Thank you. Next, we have Adam from Placita on the line. Adam, you are live with Congresswoman Stansberry.
Hi. So you partially answered my question, but I do feel like what the Republicans are doing right now is taking the shutdown as an opportunity to attack the Democrats. And just within the community and within the media that I'm seeing a lot more from their side. I feel like they're doing a better job spreading the word and using it to attack us. I was just wanting to ask you what strategies you're using to combat that and what we can do to help you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. It's absolutely true. There is just a tremendous amount of disinformation being put out there by the administration and by the Republican leadership of Congress right now. A little bit of context, because some of you have probably seen that the White House and agencies have illegally put banners on many government websites blaming Democrats. There has also been a takeover of federal employees' emails. So literally people got sent home on the 30th, and then they hacked their emails and put away notices on several agencies' email. Like literally they hacked federal worker emails and put these away notices. And they actually sent out email notices from some of the federal agencies to all of their clients. All of that activity is illegal. It's illegal under the Hatch Act. You cannot use government resources for partisan political activities. And so there is already at least one major lawsuit against the administration. But as we've seen, this administration is not partial to following the law. And so certainly I expect that as the case works through the courts, there'll be likely restraining orders, et cetera. But in the meantime, the administration is just breaking the law and doing whatever it wants. In addition to that, you know, every president has the biggest bully pulpit that exists on planet Earth because people want to know what a president has to say. And so the daily AI memes from the president, the speeches from the West Wing and from the press briefing room, and then these daily press briefings that are coming out of Republican leadership all have created an echo chamber, certainly within the worlds that they communicate and with mass media. We are using every tool that we can. This is part of why we're having a telephone town hall, why I use my social media to explain what's going on. We're all going on as many blogs as we can and podcasts and using all the media that we have access to. But at the end of the day, whether it's fighting back against the government shutdown, whether it's fighting back against these attacks on our freedoms, on voting rights, on the environment, any issue that you care about, it's going to require that the American people really link up and unite and use our free speech and use free assembly like we did on Saturday to raise our voices in opposition to what's happening. And I know that sometimes it feels really hopeless and that it can feel very helpless as an individual, but I can tell you that even if the president was dismissive and incredibly insulting to the American people after the mass marches that happened, on Saturday, 7 million Americans showed up in cities all across the United States, and people showed up all over the world. I don't know if folks know this. There were protests all over the world in solidarity with the American people. And I know that it bothered the administration, and they know that what they're doing is historically unpopular, and they may be playing like it's no big deal and they're just going to insult the American people. But we've seen time and time again, when we organize, when we unite, when we fight back, we've been successful in the courts. We've been successful in uniting with some of our Republican allies and shutting down some of the egregious things they're trying to do. And we've been successful in pushing back and saying the American people are not going to stand for this. So, what I say is that we just have to continue to be loud. We have to continue to organize, and we have to continue to exercise our rights as, to free speech as citizens of this great democracy. So thanks for that question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next up, we have Donald from Albuquerque. Donald, you are on the line with Congresswoman Stansberry.
Yes, Congresswoman. What I want to know is, how does the shutdown, how does it affect the children in Albuquerque public schools because of the breakfast programs and in education in general, because of a lot of trauma that some New Mexicans go through? I'm a treatment provider for the state of New Mexico. I work with a lot of people who go through addiction or mental health. So how does it affect the children? Because they're the ones that's most vulnerable at this time right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Donald. And thank you for the work that you do to help our community members who are struggling. That's such important work. And I just I'm so grateful to anyone that works with individuals and families who are struggling. So, there's a number of ways that the shutdown hurts families, especially really vulnerable families. I think the one we are most frightened about right now is this looming threat where the administration is talking about cutting off SNAP benefits if the shutdown extends into November. In fact, they've even been talking about cutting off EBT cards. As somebody who grew up on food assistance, I can tell you that I find it morally reprehensible that an administration that is about to guarantee a $40 billion bailout to Argentina and a dictator is about to cut off the $42 a week that keep families fed. I mean, that is not okay. That is not an acceptable outcome, and we're going to fight that with everything that we have. But in terms of school programs, it's our understanding that for the majority of normal formula funding for our schools, that goes through the states. It's administered through the states, and so we do expect to see continued operation of school lunch programs, the normal Department of Education programs, and also normal school funding. But I will say this, and again, this is kind of like, to me, says a lot about the character of what they're doing in this shutdown. The Republicans and the president said last week that they were intentionally going after quote unquote Democrat programs to try to punish Democrats. And one of the programs that they said that they were going to shut down during the shutdown was they were going to lay off and fire federal workers who work in the special education programs at Department of Education. And so to me, that says everything. The fact that as a punitive action that they don't even have the legal authority to do, that they would fire the federal workers that make it possible for children in low income and at need families and kids who have special needs to access the basic things that they need to learn, I think is disgusting. I think it's morally reprehensible. And I think that ultimately the American people are going to say, no, we're not going to put up with this. So again, we're pushing back with everything we have in Congress and the courts and in our communities. And if we have families out there that are struggling or have seen some need of theirs being cut off, please contact my office. We're here to help, and we'll do whatever we can to help. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So now we're going to take a question from an online participant. What is Governor Lujan Grisham doing to protect New Mexicans from the shutdown? And how does that align with you?
Yeah, so the governor and the congressional delegation had been meeting for months over the summer as the Big Ugly Bill was being debated in Congress. And it was actually the governor who was convening us on a weekly basis to discuss what we would do to protect New Mexicans if that bill would pass. And so over the course of those conversations, consultation with our families and communities in New Mexico, consultation with state and nonprofit entities that provide services under those programs, the governor decided to call a special session about 3 weeks ago. And the Democratic leadership here in our legislature agreed that we need to do whatever we can with the resources that we have here in the state to protect New Mexicans. So during that special session, they passed 5 bills. One of the bills was to try to, as much as possible, deal with the increases in the Affordable Care Act subsidies, the increases in the premiums that New Mexicans would see, but it's not sustainable long-term, and it doesn't benefit all families. And so, New Mexico is fortunate right now. We have a income coming in from a boom in natural resource production. And so some of that surplus funding was allocated towards that. There was also money allocated to help the state agency that administers food assistance programs to prepare for the changes from the Big Ugly Bill so that people didn't get kicked off of SNAP benefits. They also included funding for our food banks so that they would have additional funding when food assistance situations got more dire. And there was also a bill that passed regarding protecting access to vaccines. And New Mexico, as far as we understand, maybe the only state in the United States to shore up funding for public broadcasting. So one of the things that this administration did was attack funding for PBS and NPR, and that affects local affiliates all over the state of New Mexico, including tribal radio stations around the state, rural radio stations, and of course, PBS New Mexico. And so the state made the decision to shore up the public broadcasting, partly because in many communities, that's the primary source of information around emergency situations. So those are the things that the state has chosen to do, and I fully support all of those bills and applaud the leadership of our governor and our legislature in taking that action, because even though it may not feel like it, New Mexicans struggle, we know we're one of the only states to actually take proactive action to protect our citizens right now. So we're fortunate to live in a state where our legislature and our governor are taking care of us.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next up, we have John from Albuquerque. John, you're live with Congresswoman Stansberry.
Hi, Congresswoman. I want to thank you for your service as our representative in Congress. I myself am a 42-year military and federal civil servant to America and defending our ideals through the Department of Defense. I say DOD because I don't believe in the DOW, period. I have 55 civilians I had to furlough as an HR director. And I think I need the Republicans to be called out by the Democratic Party for those who are accepting their pay. As you told us, you are not accepting it. I have people that have house payments, car payments, and medical bills that need to be paid. And the Republicans are voicing concern about how they won't honor the 2019 law that was put in place because the Republicans wouldn't do their job when President Trump shut down the government previously for 35 days.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you as a constituent to toe the line and hold them accountable. Additionally, I'm really concerned because I have a disabled grandchild. I want to know what you could do or what the Democrats are doing to mitigate the big ugly bill that might impact Medicaid. I understand we all have medical subsidies that are coming up in the very near future that'll expire, but I have a disabled grandchild that needs the Medicaid support, and I just want to know what you and the state itself will do if the government fails to do their part.
Yeah.
And then I ask you to toe the line. Don't give in. The Democratic Party needs to stand up to the tyranny that we're seeing, the abuse of the Constitution I defended for 42 years of my life.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your service. And thank you to all of your workers who are furloughed for their service as well. In response to the issue of, number one, holding Republicans accountable who are taking their pay while you guys aren't getting paid. Absolutely. I think, one of the things that I think is really important, we've been using our social media and media opportunities to call out the fact that Republicans aren't even flying back to Washington, D.C. right now. Like I show up to the House of Representatives and the doors are literally locked. They're not even there. But I think your point about taking pay while service members, veterans, people who are serving this country in civilian roles at the Department of Defense are not getting paid, that's a really important point. So I appreciate you bringing that in. It's something we will absolutely be highlighting. In terms of, holding the line, I can tell you that Democrats are united. I've never seen such unity as I'm seeing right now. There's a few isolated individuals who have decided to take a different path, but by and large, both in the House and Senate, we're very clear. This is not a game. We're not fighting to win a game. We're fighting to protect the safety, the health, the well-being, and the dignity of the American people. And we are not going to back down. And you have my word on that. So know that I'm here and that I have your back on that. In terms of, again, any of our federal workers that have any financial hardships, please know that there is a whole list of programs, services that are available to help you get through the next few weeks. Don't miss out on your rent or your mortgage. There are local banks that will give zero interest loans so that you can pay your mortgages and your rent. So please, 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 if you need assistance, call my office. We don't want anyone to end up in a dire situation, but it is important that we continue to hear that so that I can amplify your stories out there. Now, in terms of Medicaid and what we're doing to help protect families, part of this big ugly bill was changes to how Medicaid is administered that will make it hard for families to continue to stay covered under Medicaid. And one of the things that the governor and the legislature are doing through the state legislation, and I'm sure through legislation that they'll be moving in the next session in January, is to make sure that the state is in a good position to try to protect our families so that you don't get cut off by these new requirements under the federal system. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they are trying to take $1.5 trillion out of our healthcare system, including Medicaid and Medicare. I mean the White House, the president, the Republicans, that is what the current law says, and it will impact millions of Americans. And I know for families that are on Medicaid, people who are sick, people who have children that depend on the programs that are paid by Medicaid, this is life or death and basic dignity for your families. So we're going to fight tooth and nail every day until they repeal that law. So that's my commitment to you. And the state is going to do everything that it can in the meantime to make sure that our families are protected. So thanks for the question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next up, we have Patricia from Albuquerque. Patricia, you're live with Congresswoman Stansberry.
Thank you. This is really amazing to me. First, I want to thank Congresswoman Stansberry for your social media outreach. It is really making a difference. It's giving me information that I can feed back to the folks who live here in my 55 plus adult community. It flabbergasts me that so many of them are misinformed or ill-informed, and their amazement when I share the facts with them about things that they are not hearing, where they listen to TV or I don't know where their heads are in a hole somewhere. But thank you for those, especially when we can share them. They're shareable. I see more from you than I see of any of the other New Mexico officials. So it would be great to just plaster social media with more. Because I really feel that it's a waste of your breath to talk to your people across the aisle. They're not listening. They're listening to their thing. It's horrendous. I was so proud of New Mexico citizens to see the numbers that turned out on Saturday. And thank you again for what you're doing to help us.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And I'm glad that it's helpful. I'm a regular New Mexican, like all of you guys. I was born in Farmington and grew up in Albuquerque. And, I think like many people, followed politics as much as the next person because I was busy doing other things. And when I did decide to run for office, I was amazed by what I saw. It's when you're inside these buildings, when you sit in these debates, when you listen to what things people say, I just can't believe it. And so part of what I try to do with my social media is to let you all hear for yourselves what's going on and draw your own conclusions, because I think it's pretty plain when you know the facts that there's some bad stuff going on. And, it's really important that we are informed about what's going on. And so I try to use my social media to be your eyes and ears on the ground. So I appreciate that. Every member of Congress has a different style and a different way of doing the work that they do. I often say now that I'm a member that there's 535 different ways to be a member of Congress. And I think for many members, the media environment that we live in now with social media is new. And, to make the transition from the old school, like I do a press conference and give a speech, to, getting on social media and telling you guys what happened when I walked out of the house, it's a different way of doing Congress. And so I really see my role as being the representative of the people. And like I said, being your ears and your eyes on the ground so that you can see for yourself what's going on in this democracy. In terms of getting the word out, yeah, please just continue. Sharing posts is great. Talk to your friends and family. I think for many people that are alarmed by what's going on right now, like I said a few minutes ago, it can feel very hopeless and helpless, but it's just going to be one person at a time. It's going to be, reclaiming our democracy, reclaiming our country, and rebuilding. And I believe in us. We can do this. And so just keep having those difficult conversations. Please keep sharing information. And I do think for the vast majority of the American people, they see what's going on. I was on a polling call earlier today, and it's very clear the American people at large, they see what's happening, and they're not buying the talking heads that they're seeing out of the White House. So continue to share that information, and just really appreciate you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next up, we have Catherine from Corrales. Catherine, you're live with Congresswoman Stansberry.
Very much appreciated. I did want to touch on the CMS reductions that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, in combination with the insurance premium increases that we provide for our employees and what that will do to medical practices in New Mexico. I believe in 2023, we saw a 4.5% decrease in our fee schedule. In 2025, it was a 2.83% decrease in our fee schedule, and a 3.4% decrease in 2024. Just today, I opened a letter from our insurance carrier that indicated our premiums are anticipated to increase by 12.1%. And just wanted to speak to what that does to private physicians in New Mexico. There was talk of a healthcare crisis, for the entire country, but I think specifically for New Mexico, we've seen, we've lost quite a few providers, and this potential increase in our premium, combined with the CMS fee reductions that we've received over the past few years, could just potentially not be sustainable for private practices, and just wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just say very quickly is, I think every New Mexican experiences the healthcare shortage here in New Mexico, including myself. I'm on the healthcare exchange. In fact, it's required on members of Congress, and I have trouble getting in to see specialists as well. I just tried to get in to see a specialist and couldn't get seen until next January. So I understand, because I'm also in this healthcare environment. The issue around decreasing reimbursement for Medicaid and Medicare is a financial crisis here in New Mexico. 2/3 of our state is on Medicaid and Medicare, which means if you are a small practitioner or a clinic, you're not getting reimbursed for your services at the cost that it costs to provide them. And so I have co-sponsored a number of bills in Congress to address the reimbursement for medical services, but my Republican colleagues have, instead of trying to address the real healthcare crisis that is affecting so many people, cut people off of healthcare. So I hear you. I do think that in the wake of all this insanity over the healthcare crisis caused by these cuts, my hope, my prayer is that it gives the political push on both sides of the aisle to have meaningful healthcare reform that actually fixes the broken system. And in my opinion, I would like to see the United States ultimately end up with universal healthcare. But in the meantime, we got to fix some very serious problems with the current business model for how the government is doing healthcare. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I'd like to remind everyone that if we weren't able to get to you, please remain on the phone and you can leave a voicemail, leave your name, address, email address, and your message. And our last question is coming from Carl in Rio Rancho. Carl, you are live with Congresswoman Stansbury.
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman Stansbury. Most appreciative for everything you've done. And I understand you were involved in the No Kings March. Thank you so much for being here. I was also there and was really excited to see how many people showed up in their friendly attitudes and most helpful in terms of encouraging everybody to show their resistance to the autocracy that we see emanating from the White House in particular. We're really upset about the fact that the Republican congressmen are not, and congresswomen are not showing up for their jobs. Mm-hmm. They're not doing what is necessary to keep the country moving forward. I want to know what sort of pressure we can put on those Republican Congress people to do their jobs.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for practicing your democratic rights this weekend. I was at the march on Saturday in Albuquerque, and I was deeply proud to be a part of what was believed to be the largest democratic protest in American history. So that's a big deal. And I think the estimates I saw for Albuquerque is that we had 30 to 50,000 people show up. That's massive. It was an impressive and inspiring and fun day. So I'm grateful to everyone who showed up, whether it was Albuquerque or Diaz or Santa Fe or wherever you showed up. If you did, let me just end by saying a few things. One is, a lot of people are saying, well, are we going to even have another election again? How do we safeguard our democracy? And the answer to that question is we are literally having an election right now. And so wherever you live, whatever county you're in New Mexico, all across the state, local elections are happening right now. Elections for mayors, county commissioners, and school board members. And I want to just remind folks that our local elections, they are the front line and they are the safeguard of our democracy. If you want to make sure that our people are protected from these federal incursions, if you are concerned about the environment, if you're concerned about civil liberties, if you're concerned, about the rights of our kids in schools to access fair and meaningful educational opportunities. All of these start in those local elections. So if you haven't gotten out to vote, go vote. That's one thing that you can do. There's also efforts all over the country right now during this election cycle. I'm not going to speak on it in a partisan way, but there are multiple elections nationally that are really important for safeguarding our democracy, both state level and initiatives that protect voting rights and protect against the efforts to try to stop redistricting. You can get involved in those. And in terms of continuing to keep the pressure on my colleagues across the aisle, I really appreciated the gentleman who spoke up earlier, who shared about his own service in the military and his civilian service, because here's what I think. If you took the oath of office, whether you took that oath as a member of Congress or a local official, or you took that oath if you signed up for boot camp and to enlist in the military, You have an oath to defend the Constitution and to defend the American people. And so that is incumbent on our colleagues across the aisle to show up, to do their jobs, to honor their oath, and to defend the American people against the abuse of power that we're seeing. And the only way that we can continue to do that is two ways. One is by raising our voices and exercising our rights. And so that means continuing to call and show up and let Republican leaders who are not doing their job and not honoring their oath, know how the American people feel. And the other is electoral. If people are not going to do their jobs, then it's time for them to be replaced by somebody who is going to honor their oath. And so, that is the most patriotic thing that all of us can do right now, is to speak up, to speak out, to show up, to vote, and to exercise our democratic rights, because that is how we save our democracy. So I appreciate you all for tuning in tonight. And I think that's a good place to wrap things up. And so I'll turn it over to Ebony to close us out.
Thank you, Congresswoman. If you would like to sign up for our newsletter, please press *6 now, and have a great night.